So a little bit about what we're going to talk about tonight is the proper way to show a house. Okay. Believe it or not, there is a structured format for showing a house to basically grab the most success. But at the same time, you're going to be asking important questions of the buyer to kind of gain an idea or a knowledge of what their level of intensity is at this point in time when it comes to purchasing a house. So we try to weave those in so that they're kind of informative, but informal at the same time. You know, you want people to be in a relaxed atmosphere when you're asking important questions. And so that's kind of going to be the track for this evening, the learning a few things about how to show a house, what to look for in a house, you know, highlights that you would point out that are considered upgrades, are also things that help build value in the property. And at the same time, you need to know a little bit more about your buyer. So we'll get started, as I said, in a few minutes.
Okay, sounds good.
We should be able to wrap this class up in about an hour and a quarter to an hour and a half. Probably won't take the full 2 hours like last night. In fact, other than the first class of the sessions, the contract class for the buyer side that we're doing this week, and the paperwork for the contracts for the seller side next week, we generally do finish in about an hour and a half.
Okay.
But the paperwork part is a bit intimidating, as you saw from the agreement of sale, which is 14 pages long. And there's many other documents that we'll touch on along with the contract later on this week. So
okay. Hey, just on a side note, Caitlin may have mentioned to you, tomorrow my boy and I are driving out to Ohio. So I don't anticipate being able to get on the meeting tomorrow night. But I understand it's recorded, so perhaps I could watch it.
Yeah, so they are recorded, but I don't have them. I had them recorded on my home computer. What I have to do then is download them to a thumb drive, and then Lauren will put them up on the internet. So they won't be done instantly because I wait till all the classes for the week are finished. That way I can fit them all on one thumb drive. Okay.
Yeah.
But he never gives them back to me. You know, so.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. This is something we planned a while ago, and then I found out about the class, wanted to jump on board. So
I know you were kind of last minute on there because you just got finished with what you were doing. So that's fine. We'll give you a pass this time. You're fine for Thursday though?
Yes. Yeah, I'll be back on Thursday. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that'll wrap up this week. By Friday, we should have these classes up on YouTube. Lauren will send you the link on them so that you can, view the one you missed.
Okay.
Because, tomorrow's class is going to be more into, here we're going to learn how to show a house properly. And tomorrow we're going to basically go through how to search for a property. So it's going to be a little bit of MLS training tomorrow, which is also very beneficial to have. Even if you've never seen the MLS before and you're not familiar with it, it's just a good idea to basically get somewhat familiar with how to set up a search. I do have a handout that I send to people, and these that we're doing tonight is also going to be a handout that I will email to everybody.
Okay.
So we've got 3 of you on. Hopefully, now I know there's one person who already took this class that will not be on today, but will be in tomorrow. There's one other person who was on yesterday that should be here today, and I don't see them yet. However, no reason to hold things up, so we're going to get started. So just to set the stage, I'm assuming everybody can see the shared screen in front of you there where it says 4 important questions. Just let me know that you can see that.
Yep, I can see it.
All right, then if you can see it, everybody else can too. So here are the 4 important questions, and then we're going to go through and weave these into the actual showing presentation of the property. So the 4 important questions that you need to know, and this assumes that you're working with someone you've never met before. So obviously some of these questions, let's say the first time out of the box, you're showing a property to your mom or your dad or a relative, a brother or sister, a neighbor, okay, just somebody that's in your warm market, someone you already know. You may have already had a discussion with them, and you may know how soon they need to find a place, and you may know whether they have to sell a house or not buy a house. So these questions are basically the idea that you were sitting in the office, you got a lead, you called the person back and they said, yeah, I'm interested in that house you have on the market at such and such. Okay, great. Let me find out when we can see it. So what's a good time for you? Well, I'd like to see it later today if I can. Okay, well, hold tight. I'm going to go up into the MLS and find out what the showing instructions are so I can determine whether it's showable, because some properties require, 24-hour notice and that sort of thing. If it's vacant, I can usually get you right in. So I'll put them on hold and I'll look it up, or I'll say, let me have your phone number and I'll call you back. Okay. Either way, you want to try to gain some of their contact information right off the bat. So now this person, you don't know anything about them, and you don't know if they can buy a house or not. You don't know anything about their background, if they have a house to sell or any of those things. So there's going to be questions that you're going to need to know. But the reason why I lay the format in this way is because over the years, I've seen agents try to pre-qualify a buyer over the phone. I don't think that's a very good idea. If I was really very good on the phone, I would probably be in telemarketing and not selling real estate. So I just don't think it's a good idea to practice that way, because you really can't make a connection with a client, potential client anyway, until you've had a chance to meet them. That's been my philosophy. You certainly are entitled to, do your business the way you want. But my thing has always been, I got to meet someone before I can kind of do the evaluation. And I know that sometimes I might go out there on an appointment and be wasting my time. But my philosophy has always been, I will show one person or one couple, let's say, one client, one property anytime it's possible to do so. Then I'm going to gain a little bit of knowledge about that person, and I'll be able to make the determination as to whether or not we've got something we can work with here. So don't get caught in a trap of trying to pre-qualify them because you're afraid you might be wasting your time. You very well might be, but odds are you're not. Okay, because most people who make a phone call and call an agency about a property or a listing, or if they send an email inquiry or however they do it, generally they buy a house within 60 days. So you don't want to push that potential buyer away just because you're feeling a little bit lazy today. So I strive to let you know that, if you're going to put your hours into making the business successful, you absolutely have to grab every possible opportunity. So if someone's calling in on a property, great. Let me find out when we get in there and call them back. Good news. We get in there at 4 o'clock today. So I'll meet you there. Here's the address of the property. Do you need directions? That sort of thing. So assuming you've gotten that out of the way, you now have a solid appointment. You still know nothing about this person's motivation level or ability. So you don't know whether you've got a ready, willing, and able buyer at this point in time, but that's okay. You really want to be able to find that out when you get started on the showing. You're going to weave in the important question to find out how soon you need a place to live. You're also going to ask them, do you have to sell a home, your current property, or are you in a lease? So we need to find out what their housing situation is now. Third question you're going to be walking into is, you're going to ask them, have they talked to a lender yet to get a pre-qualification, or do you need a lender referral? You might be able to give them the name of someone if they haven't done that yet. And the last question you're going to need to know the answer to is, how much cash do they have available, including down payment and closing costs? Now, if you rattle all 4 of these questions off at one time to someone over the phone, you're just going to close the door. Yeah, and I'm not really comfortable talking about that right now. I mean, the first 2 questions are not that intimidating. So they may answer a question like that over the phone. How soon do you need a place to live? It's pretty, non-intrusive. Okay. And ask them if they have to sell a house or if they're renting now, what their current status is probably not too intimidating. Asking them if they have talked to a lender is probably not real intimidating either, but now you're really starting to get into the weeds. And when you get to the point of asking them how much cash they have for their purchase, they're going to be a bit reluctant to give you that information because they don't know you. Okay. So the point is, these questions are important, but the time to ask them is on the initial interview. And I call showing a property an interview, because let's face it, when you meet a client, whether it be a potential buyer or a potential seller, it really is a job interview. And one of the things you're going to find out in this business, that once you're hired, you're going to make a commission. Basically, this is how you'll earn a living. Okay. Once you finish with that sale, you're technically fired. Now, they didn't fire you, but the point is, there's no more business coming from that person unless you stay in contact with them and keep them in your list of people that you talk to once in a while, send them an update once in a while, and maybe they then get used to referring you to their friends and relatives and people in their sphere of influence. So those are the questions. Let's go up here now and show you how you use them. Okay, these handouts are very simple. I'm a pretty simple person, so when I created them, it was with the idea of giving you somewhat of a guideline. But basically, when you go through this, you're going to find out there's a whole lot more meat and potatoes that go with each one of these, let's say, points, okay, bullet points. So I do definitely recommend that during these classes, you keep a legal pad and a pen next to you and you jot down some important notes. Some of those are going to be important when it comes to showing the house, because you're going to gain a little bit of knowledge on how a house is constructed. What are the highlights to show when you're showing a property? And at the same time, you're going to be weaving in these important questions. So you can see right off this bat that you are the one controlling the interview, and that's the way it's supposed to be. Okay, if you're controlling the interview, you become the expert. And you'll see that if you just learn a little bit of key points here, you're going to come off as being the expert. No one's going to say, well, Bill, Elizabeth, how long have you guys been in the business? They're not going to ask you that. They're going to say, wow, this person seems to have their game together. And that's the image you want to portray. For them to be able to trust you to probably buy the most expensive thing in their life that they're ever going to buy, which is going to be their house. And that's the case for most people. They need to know, like, and trust you. And you kind of weave that in as you go along by showing your knowledge of what you're doing, and at the same time, gaining the information you need from them to be able to successfully get to the settlement table. So that's the idea. So starting at the showing techniques right here, we basically start with question number, with bullet point number 1, where we say, when possible, start the front door. It's 99.9% of the time always possible to start at the front door. So the appointment kind of goes like this. Try to meet at the property or get to the property if you're showing 1. If you're showing 6, then the first property you're showing, you want to meet with them and get there maybe 5 minutes before they do. Doesn't always work that way. Sometimes they beat you to the appointment, but whatever. You're going to typically go to the front door. Usually that's where the lockbox will be and the key, and you'll be able to get into the house. So that's what they mean when they say, when possible, start at the front door. Now, sometimes people don't like to see a lockbox on the front door. They don't want their neighbors know that they're selling their house. Sometimes there won't even be a yard sign outside. Usually there is, but sometimes there isn't. And so the lockbox could be on a side door or a back door. You'll actually find that out because when you set up a showing time appointment, they'll tell you where the lockbox is located. Usually it's the front door. But what if it's on the side door or the rear door? What do? Well, if you got there ahead of time, you go around to the side door or front door, open the lockbox, and you meet them at the front door. If they got there before you, or if you both got there at the same time, or let's say you're showing them 3 properties, so this worked the first time, now you go to the second house you're going to show, and you're both there at the same time, and you find that the lockbox, you look at your sheet of instructions you wrote down, and you go, oh, the lockbox is on the side door. Just say, you guys wait right here. I'll be right back. I'll open up the house and I'll meet you at the front door. So you could typically be able to meet the people at the front door. Why is that important? Okay, the reason is because there's a certain method to the way we want to show the property. We generally want to show the main living area first, and most people's let's say most people's idea of looking at the property and basically mentally taking ownership of the property starts with how inviting the property looks. And that's usually going to be the front door. In other words, entering in the back door where you might enter into a mud room or laundry room or even directly into the kitchen, not as palatable to the buyer as walking through the front door and seeing a beautiful foyer with hardwood floors or tile or something like that. So there's the reason why it's best to start the front door. Now, I'll give you a side story here. I'm showing properties one Saturday afternoon, and nice neighborhood. People are out mowing the lawns, swimming in their pools. It's a nice summer day, and the garage doors are open, and the male homeowner is on the riding mower. The female homeowner is in the garage dealing with like little plants things. And she says, oh, the house is open. Just go through the garage. Well, what do you do then? Just go through the garage. Okay. In other words, don't make life difficult. That's what I said. In that particular situation, it's like, oh, well, they're inviting us in here. So usually that's not going to happen. Most of the time you're going to show a property, sellers aren't going to be there, but it's not a perfect world. It doesn't always work that way. So be flexible. But what I did in that situation is we went through the garage, like they said, and then we went to the front door. And that's where we started. So you can almost always control the situation when you do it like that. You really want to start at the front door and say, and point out some highlights. Now, here's a couple of pointers I'm going to give you here. I really don't know any of you well enough to know what your level of expertise is, where you live, how many houses you may have bought, if you've ever bought a house, or if you're brand new and you're just starting out and you've never owned real estate. Doesn't matter. Best thing for you to do is take some time for anything you're not familiar with. Go to Home Depot, go to Lowe's, and take a look at what kitchens look like. Take a look at flooring. Take a look at carpeting. Take a look at what high-end things look like versus just, you know, medium grade or builder grade is a term they like to use when you're looking at properties. Get familiar with things that are highlights and or upgrades, if you will. So going back and setting the stage, you start at the front door. What do we look for? Well, depends on the type of house. You might be showing a ranch where as soon as you open the front door, you're in the living room. There's no foyer at all. Okay, that's fine. You're going to look at the living room. What do we look for? Well, we look for, do we have high ceilings? Do we have any crown molding? Do we have a fireplace in the living room? These would be things that we would point out and say, oh, a nice appointment to this room. If it's got new flooring or hardwood flooring, or if the carpet's in really good shape. What do you do when you go in there and the carpet looks like crap? Well, just don't talk about it. Okay. It's one of those things where if the client says, oh, the carpets are kind of beat there. Yeah, carpet's not very expensive and it's easy enough. You'd probably want to start with new carpeting anyway. So there's always a way to overcome some kind of an objection like that. Okay. But yeah, sometimes you're going to show a property and it's not going to be as well kept as we'd like. And sometimes you're going to show something that looks like a jewel. Okay. It's absolutely perfect. So you have to be flexible enough to adapt to whatever situation you're in. So when possible, start at the front door, show the main living area first. What do I consider the main living area? The main living area is the area that the public sees. Okay. This is going to be the part of the house that you live in. It's not the part of the house you bathe in or you sleep in. Those would be considered your privacy areas. The general public doesn't see that. So the first impression a buyer is going to get about the house is, how inviting is this house? How do I feel about owning this house and showing it to my friends and relatives? What kind of pride level do I have here? Now, they may not come out and say that in words, but this is what's going through a buyer's mind when they first go to a house. They're looking at it and saying, ooh, do I like this? Oh, I like that, or I don't like that. And that's kind of what a buyer is thinking in the back of their mind as you start showing the house. So another example, let's say you're showing a house that's a bi-level. If you're not familiar with the bi-level, you're going to walk in on a landing and there's going to be steps going down to a level, and there's going to be steps going up to the living level. Okay. If you're in a ranch, you're right there on the first floor. If you're walking into a colonial house, you'll typically see some kind of center hall foyer. You may have a dining room to the right, a living room to the left. That's a typical layout. There may be a vaulted ceiling staircase, or if it's an older style colonial, it may be just a staircase on the side of the room there, some kind of a stairways in a hall. There'll generally be a half bath maybe right around that area as well. That's a typical plan in a colonial style home. So that's the living area. Where do you go? No right or wrong answer. Go to the dining room first, go to the living room first. Doesn't really matter. You're in the hall. And look for things that look like pluses. Like I mentioned, if you see a fireplace, that's something to talk about. Oh, what a beautiful stone fireplace. Okay. That would be things that, you know, you might see a stack stone, really nice and popular. People go, oh, I really love that stack stone look on the fireplace. Point that out. If you've got 9-foot ceilings, and you can be able to figure that out. Standard houses are built with 8-foot ceilings, so it's an upgrade if you see a 9-foot or 10-foot ceiling in a house. So that would be something to point out if you see that. And use that as something as an upgrade. If you're in a dining room and you see crown molding and chair rail, if you don't know what chair rail is, it's going to be about 3 feet from the floor. It goes all the way around the perimeter of the dining room. It's called a chair rail because in days of old, when knights were bold, chairs would go out from the table, hit the wall, and that was designed to be something that would protect the wall by having a chair rail. So it's a typical thing you'll see in a lot of dining rooms. Other things you might see in the dining room, your living room could be hardwood or could be carpeting, but your dining room might be hardwood floors. That's a very popular thing that you'll see in a lot of colonials with a formal dining room. If it has it, point it out. These are things to talk about. Other things to look at is, what do the windows look like? Is there a bay window or bow window in the front? Is that something that we would talk about? Sure. That's a $2,000 to $3,000 window. Typically, I would consider that an upgrade. Now, it may have been built by the builder and put in that way, but believe me, when the builder built it, even if it's a 30, 40-year-old home, that window was an upgrade. You don't get those standard. Just spend the money to replace one someday, and you'll know what I mean. They're not cheap. Okay. While we're on the subject of windows, let me give you a little bit of information that it's going to help you here. Nowadays, the upgrade window is going to be something that's called a dual pane window. All new construction has dual pane windows, but you can have dual pane windows going back 30, 40 years because that's when they started. The difference in the quality of the window is defined by the distance between the two panes of glass. So old style, or what I call first generation windows, there was about a 1/4 inch gap, and you can see that. It's a great window. It's not as good as what they make today, but it was great for its time. Really nothing wrong with that window. But what you'll typically see in a higher end window at this point is about 3/4 of an inch of space, even sometimes 1 inch of space between the two panes of glass. If you see that, especially if you're showing an older house, it looks like they probably have replacement windows. That's something that you would talk about. And here, you got to use this some common sense depending on the type of house. You're showing a house that's 5 years old, of course it's going to have that. If you're showing a house that's 40 years old and it has that, then that's considered an upgrade. Oh, it looks like somebody spent some money on some new windows here. So what's nice is even though the house is 40 years old, it looks like there's some replacement windows. That's really nice. So it would be an upgrade in that situation. Would I call it an upgrade if I'm showing a 5-year-old house? No, it's expected in a 5-year-old house. So these are just a couple of tips about windows. And the reason for the distance is because the greater the gap between the two panes of glass, the more gas there is in between the two windows. If you're not familiar with how the dual pane window works, it's got argon and sometimes krypton gas in it, which is designed to be an insulation barrier. And that insulation barrier is what defines it as a high-end window. If you're showing a house that's 70 years old, let's say in Allentown, and it has its original windows, it's going to be a single pane window. There's probably going to be storm windows on there. And there's nothing wrong with that window either. You got to, address it based on what you're selling them. If you're selling a row home in Allentown, it might be priced at $125,000, and it may not have that. But in that price range, that's perfectly okay. Okay. But if you're showing a $350,000 home in Whitehall and it's got single pane windows, that's not so okay. That probably means that house hasn't been really taken care of and it's a bit overpriced. So these are just some tips I'm giving you here, not things that you would point out to the buyer. So as we go through this, I'm going to point out some of the things that you want to look for. And as I said, when we're finished here today, your homework lesson, and by the way, there's no test, but your homework lesson is take some time when you have some time and go to Home Depot and go to Lowe's and visit their kitchen displays and visit the bathroom displays and take a look at the differences of things you can find there. Get familiar with what Corian countertops look like and granite countertops look like. Okay. Look at some of the high-end cabinets. If there's a stacks of 36 and 42s, that's the height of the cabinets. Those are considered upgrades, and those are things to look for in a kitchen, but we're not there yet. Let's finish in the living room and dining room. This might be a good time to ask the first question. So now I've met them, and it's Joe and Mary. So, well, by the way, Joe and Mary, how long have you been looking for a property? What am I asking when I ask that question? I'm trying to find out, have they been shopping with someone else? And have they been looking at properties with 9 different realtors at this point? How am I going to win these people so that they commit themselves to me? Well, first off, it's going to come from my knowledge of construction. That's why I'm pointing that out to you. And you don't have to be a contractor to know this basic information. I was a contractor, just full disclosure here. So I come from a background that gave me a slight edge over the years, knowing all this stuff. But as I said, you don't have to be a contractor. You just have to know some of the terminology that a contractor would know. And that's what I'm going to give you here. So you start at the front door, you show the main living area first. We've now gone to the living room and dining room. If there's a first floor family room, which is typical layout in, let's say, the newer colonials, then you would maybe point some things out there too. Some of the things to look for in there is you may have a fireplace there as well. There may be a vaulted or what they call cathedral ceiling in there. It may have windows on both sides all the way around if it's like a butt out from the house next to the garage. It could also be at a different level, what we call a sunken living room or sunken family room. If it's at a different level where you step down, some people consider that an upgrade. I don't, because I'm old and I don't want to trip over the step. But I got to tell you that when people have a sunken living room or a sunken family room, it is an appointment that people do consider to be an upgrade. So if you see it, Don't forget to point these things out. Your buyer won't automatically notice these things. So you have to be the one that points them out. And when I ask them that question, by the way, how long have you been looking for a property? Well, that conversation based on how they answer the question could go a long way. Oh, we just started looking. Okay, well, then I might go right to question number 2 and say, well, let me ask you this. How soon do you need a new place to live? And I'm asking that question, and I'm going to ask them the question based on the idea that, do you have a house to sell at this point in time? As part of question number 2, or are you in a lease? If they tell you they're in a lease, okay, so you're renting now, that's great. When does your lease expire? Why am I asking that question? Well, the date that their lease expires is definitely going to be probably the time when they're going to be wanting to be in their new house. So if someone says to me, oh, our lease expires in September, great. Well, you know what? I don't know how soon you'd be ready to go. If you like this house and you want to make an offer, that's fine. But at the very least, you want to factor at least 60 to 90 days from the time your lease expires to get into your new house. So if someone says to me, yeah, we need it by September. Okay, you got a little time to shop. That's great. I'd love to help you, with that task. But you really got to make sure you get into something by June so that you can make that deadline in the back of your mind. I just learned a whole lot of information when I asked that question. I now found out how soon they're ready to go. Now they might come back and say, well, you know what? We're in a month-to-month lease, so we actually can get out anytime. Great. Then you're ready to go if you find the right property then. So you can see me asking that question gives me the information I need to know as to how best to help these people. And it also gives me some kind of an indication as to how soon they're ready to make something happen. And there's nothing wrong with a client that says, oh, we want to be in something by September and they're not ready now. Well, we'll show this property today, but if it's not your right cup of tea, I'll go on and I'll do a search for you and we'll set up sending listings to you so that, when you're ready to go, you'll have the best available look at the latest inventory. That is creating a service contract with them, mentally speaking. I don't have them committed to anything, but do you think I'm winning with these people at this point because I've asked some of the important questions that I need to know? Of course I have. Now let's run into the kitchen. That will finish up our main living area at this point in time. So we go into the kitchen. There's a whole lot of things to look for in a kitchen. And not to be sexist here, ladies, but women do make the most decisions when it comes to buying a house, not the guys. And 85% of the women who buy the house buy it based on what the kitchens and bathrooms look like. Guys buy houses for what the family room and maybe the basement looks like or the garage. It's just a fact. I'm not telling you anything that you probably don't already know. I'm just saying that these are simply tips to be aware of when it comes to looking at properties. So a real nice kitchen with a lot of fine appointments is certainly a selling feature when it comes to buying any property. Doesn't matter the price point. The nicer the kitchen, the more likely the buyer is going to fall in love with the house. So what are we looking for? Well, I already touched on a couple of things. First off, the granite countertops is certainly a nice touch. You will find that in most newer homes nowadays. And the reason for that is because the price of granite came down significantly over the last 15 years. And so now it's pretty rivaled with the cost of Formica. Now they do make some nice Formica tops. And here, once again, this is a time when you also pay attention to the price point you're in. If you're looking at a $200,000, $250,000 home for your buyer, and that's what you're qualified for, nothing at all wrong with Formica countertops. If it's got granite, then that's a plus in that price range. But your typical $200,000 home is not going to have granite countertops unless someone did a major remodel of the kitchen. And yes, you'll find them even in row homes in Allentown or Bethlehem, sure. So if it's an appointment that looks nice, point it out. If it's just got Formica tops, as long as it's not destroyed, I mean, there's not pieces coming off of it or the burn marks where someone laid a pot down, so it's destroyed, absolutely point it out that it's a nice kitchen. Other things to look for is if you have your standard 36-inch cabinets, that's great. If there's a soffit above it, okay, that kind of dates it a little bit because soffits are kind of out now. But if you're showing a house that was built 30 years ago and never been updated, it's going to have it. Nothing really to talk about there. Only other thing to point out would be pointing out the appliances. Does it have everything? And what I mean by everything is, do we have a microwave, typically a built-in microwave above the stove? Do we have a dishwasher? Not all houses do. Okay. So, most newer houses do because they're built that way. But houses that are built 40, 50 years ago, microwaves didn't exist, or they were just coming into vogue. And most of them were, countertop microwaves. They didn't start doing the built-ins until sometime in the mid 80s. Okay. So if you have those are things to point out. Nothing wrong with a house that's 185,000 that doesn't have a dishwasher. In that price point, they usually don't. Okay. And you'll show properties in all price ranges. I know we all want to show the $1 million properties. Not going to happen all the time. Okay. And I mean, if you just want to work with millionaire buyers, you're not going to sell as many houses as you could, or gain as many contacts and clients as you could, if you're willing to be open to showing any property to anyone. So I work all price points. It doesn't really matter. And so you should too. Don't lose any opportunity, because you never know when that person who buys that small home refers you to their rich uncle, okay, who says, I need a new house. This guy was pretty good, or this girl was pretty good. Why don't you, use their services? And that's going to be one of the things you're going to get used to saying. Well, if you like how our process went here, don't forget to tell all your friends. That's a common thing I say at the end of every settlement, because I'm typically getting it. Well, this is great. You made this process really nice and easy. We were dreading it. People do dread buying a house just as much as people dread buying a car. And we all have to do it at some point in time, but people do dread it. So I'm not saying that it's a fun experience, but you want to make the experience as fun as you possibly can. And that's simply the way you do that. So recapping here, we start at the front door. We show the main living area first: living room, dining room, family room, getting into the kitchen, pointing out things that are highlights in the kitchen. Other things to look for are double bowl sinks. If you've got granite countertops and the sink hangs below the counter, that would be an upgrade. If you see high-end faucets like, brushed nickel or bronze type of faucets. I mean, if all you see is chrome faucets, which are pretty much standard grade, it's nothing to talk about, but it's not a bad thing. I'm just saying, you point out the highlights. If you do see hardwood or tile in the bathroom, point out the floor. Another thing to look for is if you've got a center island. Some of your smaller homes aren't going to have that. A lot of your bigger homes will have a center island. Now, it may be just a cabinet island where you put some bar stools up against it. It may be a center island that actually has a Jenn-Air stove in it. Okay. These are all things to talk about if they exist. So those are things to look for in a kitchen. And as I said, I recommend you visit Home Depot and Lowe's. You don't have to buy anything. Just go in there and peruse their displays, their showcases. And actually, for bathrooms, you'll actually do better going to like Schuler Plumbing or something like that, where they actually specialize, or Essagenis Plumbing. They also have a showroom where you can really see some high-end kitchen or bathrooms, some kitchens too, but also bathrooms. Home Depot and Lowe's don't usually have too much of a display for bathrooms in there, but you can see some high-end fixtures such as sinks and vanities or whatever it may have, and also shower units. Okay. So showing the main living area, pointing out those important things, showing the privacy area is going to be next. I say ask question number 2, but there's nothing wrong with asking question number 2 when you're still showing the main living area, if in fact you lead into that conversation based on your first question, which was, how long have you been looking for a property? Or, well, how soon do you need a place to live? And I'm trying to find out what their situation is right now. Now, the next area we show is the privacy area. What is the privacy area? This is the area where the buyer takes mental possession of the property based on where they're going to have their private moments, where they're going to sleep, where they're going to shower, sometimes where their laundry is going to be. So having a second floor laundry room is something that's also considered an upgrade now. Most builders are doing it, but that was considered a taboo 40 years ago. Why? Well, because if a hose breaks on your washing machine, and back then they just used rubber hoses, and that did happen. Well, now you just flooded your second floor and probably ruined the sheetrock ceiling on your first floor, depending on how much damage there was. And I'm not saying that potential can't exist if you have a second floor laundry room, but now all of the hoses that code requires on washing machines are braided stainless steel. They're supposedly guaranteed for life, but we never want to take that for granted. So there's a tray that goes underneath the washing machine, and there's a tube that comes out of that tray that goes through the house and eventually goes to the outside of the house. So in the event of a leak from the washing machine, it will go into that pan, go out through that little hole where the hose is attached. You won't see it. You'll just see a hole in the tray, but there's a hose attached to that. The builder puts that plastic hose in there before the sheetrock is up, and somewhere sticking out the side of the house, there's a little plastic tube. That's the drain for that. You'll also see a drain light from a ceiling air conditioner. So if someone has a heat pump in their attic, there's a drain tub underneath that unit as well. If that ever has any kind of leak, because air conditioners do cause, condensation, then there's a drain tube that comes off of that as well and goes to the outside of the house. So those are safety measures built in for things that can leak in a second floor. But once again, a second floor laundry room is a high-end thing to talk about. If it exists, don't forget to point out how nice that is. I'm always inclined to say that, wow, you think someone finally got it, that the place where we actually take off our clothes and change is also the laundry room. I remember years ago when I grew up, laundry was in the basement. We even had little laundry chutes. You open it up and all your clothes went down a chute all the way into the onto the basement floor. Some people put a basket under. My mom didn't. Okay. It was like, well, they're already dirty. What's the difference? Okay. And that's the way it was done 40, 50 years ago. If you even had a laundry chute, sometimes you just carried your baskets down to the basement. That's where your laundry was. And a lot of people still have to do that today. If you buy an older house and you don't remodel it, that's what you have. Nothing wrong with it. I'm just saying that the technology got to the point where basically it's a lot nicer having your laundry right where your privacy areas is, where you change all your clothes. So that's an upgrade if you see it. In the bedrooms and in the bathrooms, well, let's talk with the bedrooms first. Not that much to talk about there. Obviously, if you see a decent sized closet, that's something to talk about. In a master bedroom, you may see what's called a walk-in closet. By the way, the definition of a walk-in closet is if you can walk in, turn around, and walk out without hitting the clothes. So don't talk to me about a vacant closet where nothing's in there. A closet hanger is typically 17 inches wide, okay? The opening where your clothes are stored are typically going to be 24 to 27 inches wide. That's code depending on what year the house was built, because it's now 27, but it used to be 24. Okay, so you typically have a 2-foot space when you open that door, whether it's a sliding door, whether it's a bifold door, however type of door it is, or if it's just a single door with a doorknob on it. When you open that closet, it's going to be 24 to 27 inches deep, unless it's not. If it's 36 inches deep and you can walk in and turn around and walk out, it's a small walk-in closet. Now, most people won't consider that a walk-in closet, but it technically is. When you do look at a walk-in closet, usually it's going to have a separate door. You might see racks all the way around in like a U-shaped type of configuration. Might be upper racks and lower racks, or a staggering amount of each, because sometimes long party dresses are going to go, up on a high-end thing, whereas shirts and suits and blouses and things like that can fit in a smaller area. So you might even see a little shoe rack in there, or little things they put in there. Sometimes there's even a little drawer unit where people put their sweaters and stuff. These are all things that you'll look for and see in a walk-in closet. And if those things are there, then obviously you talk about them, because they're called upgrades. Okay. So just things to point out. Other things to look for, of course, is pay attention to the windows. What do they look like here? Oh, it looks like they did replacement windows here as well. Probably did the whole house. We'll just look at that as we go. Sizes of the closets are good. Other highlights would be if there is a bathroom off of the bedroom, and it may not be a master bath. There's something called a Jack and Jill bathroom. So in secondary bedrooms, sometimes there'll be a main bath and 2 bedrooms share access to that bathroom. That's called a Jack and Jill bedroom. Okay. A master bedroom is going to typically have its own bath separate, no access from the common hallway area. It's primarily for the main master, and that would be, the husband and wife, okay, or whatever, being politically correct, could be the couple that's living in the house. Either way, that's going to be the area that is only shared by the primary adults in the house. There might be a main bath that is for guests and for the kids. Okay, that's typically going to be off the common hallway area. And that could be the same configuration in a ranch as would be in a colonial. The only difference there is you'll walk down the hall in a ranch, you go up the steps in a colonial. Okay, but that's going to be the thing to look at. Other things to point out there would be what other appointments are in the room. Is there overhead lighting or a ceiling fan? That's an upgrade. Builders don't put overhead lighting in standard. It's an extra, extra upsell. What are the flooring? If it's just general carpeting and it's in good shape, not much to talk about. Okay. If it's, well, usually it won't be tile. I have seen tile and marble in bedrooms, but that's usually in really high-end homes. But it will typically be, if not carpeting, it'll usually be some kind of wood, or it may even be some of the new vinyl planking type of stuff that's come out in the last couple of years. That's very popular right now. There's also some old Pergo out there that's awful. It's noisy. I don't really consider it an upgrade, but it might be covering up a really bad floor underneath. So depending on the price point, once again, it can be okay. I'm not a big fan of it in those areas, but I do see it a lot. Okay, so that's where you look at the privacy areas and point out all those upgrades too. Other things to look for is if there is an attic scuttle, typically it'll be in one of the closets, and it's just for storage, or it may actually be access to wiring or possibly plumbing. If you have a heating unit in the ceiling, as I said, where you have the filter in the maybe in the common hallway area that you have to change, then that's usually going to be where they put the AC unit in a lot of homes. Okay, so if you see those things, point them out. At this point in time, you've pointed out and talked about all the things that there really is for the main living area of the house, but that's not all there is to it. And here's where you have to get into some of the important stuff to point out and some of the things that will maybe help them make the decision on the property. You have to show them what I call the basement or mechanical area. Now, I say basement because most of the houses we show in our market area do have basements. Very few that do not, but you will occasionally come across something that's built on a slab. Just to give you an idea of built on a slab, it means they poured a concrete slab. Usually it's going to be 4 to 6 inches thick. They built the house on top of it. There's no lower level below that grade. Okay. There's a few pocket areas in Whitehall where they made houses like that and a few other places. But most houses built in the northeastern region do have basements. Now, basements means there's typically going to be a separate entrance from the inside of the house. So when you go down to that basement area, you're usually going to find their heating system. You'll typically find the electrical system down there, and you'll get somewhat of an idea of what the water and sewer situation is like. So basically going to the basement area is an important area. Sometimes you'll show a basement and it's a finished area. Okay. Sometimes that basement will actually be only partially below grade. Such as in the case of a bi-level where maybe the front of the house has dirt right up to the front door entrance, but the rear property drops off and it has a walkout basement. What's a walkout basement? That's a basement that you can open doors and you're at grade level. That's not a basement that has a staircase and a Bilco door that you go up and walk out to the backyard. That is not a walkout basement. A walkout basement has to have at least one whole wall, typically the rear wall, okay, that is at grade, meaning that you open the door, you walk out on a patio. In that type of configuration, you're typically going to walk out on a patio, and there's going to be a deck above it, okay, because that's coming off the second story, generally off the kitchen and maybe the dining room area. Okay, so if that configuration exists, I would point that out. Oh, nice deck, the nice upgrade. Oh, nice patio. What do you look for in a patio? Well, it could just be poured concrete. It could also be stamped concrete. That would be an upgrade. It could be pavers. That's also considered an upgrade. These are things to look for when you're in that lower level. Let's get back to the mechanical part of it, though. How do you know the difference between a 100 amp service and a 200 amp service? Well, there's one obvious place to look, and I'll give you that one. That's the easy one. If you open the panel and you look at the main breaker, that number will typically, I say typically, because if it's an old panel, it may not have a number on it, but code requires it today. If it says 200 on there, that's a 200 amp service. If it says 100, it's 100 amp service. You may actually find 125 and 150s, although they're not that common anymore. Okay, but when we first upgraded from 60 amp fuse panels back in like 1945, we generally went with a 60 amp service. That was the height of it. And some of those are fuses, and those were also the first circuit breaker panels. By the way, if you see fuses, that's a problem because they're not going to meet any standard appraisal at this point in time. That panel will have to get changed out. Doesn't mean they shouldn't buy the house. It just means that someone's going to be changing out a system, either the buyer or the seller. You won't run into that much anymore. I haven't seen very many fuse panels in a while, but on occasion, I still run. And you'll see there are fuse panels out there, by the way, on 200 amp services. They did exist. It's not that big a deal because the panel itself can be changed out without too much difficulty, and it's not even that expensive, under $2,000. I don't consider that a deal breaker when you're looking at the cost of buying a home today. But just be aware of what that looks for. Most of the time, you're not going to have that problem. If you're in an older property and you can't tell what kind of services it is because there's no number on the main breaker, the other way to find out, and it's real simple, if the basement is unfinished and you can see the cable coming into the panel, if it's 2 inches wide, it's a 200 amp service. If it's 1 inch wide, it's a 100 amp service. Okay. If it's a little wider than 1 inch, it's probably a 125 or it could be a 150. Okay. And if it's less than an inch, about 3/4 inch, it's only a 60 amp service. You probably won't find a 60 amp service except if it's being used as a sub panel. In other words, a panel that comes off of the main panel with a 60 amp breaker that may go to a garage or an outbuilding or something like that. That would be a sub panel. So sometimes you'll see more than one circuit breaker panel in the house, but the main unit is going to be the one that's actually connected to the meter outside. And while we're talking about outside, if it's a finished basement and you can't see the wire, guess what? You can see it when you go outside. Somewhere outside, that main cable comes in the house, and you'll be able to tell right off the meter socket if it's a 2-inch, a 1-inch, 1.25 inch, 1.5 inch. There's always a way to find out what kind of what size service it is that the house has. Building grade standard at this point in time is pretty much 200 amp service. That's all new construction will put in, no matter how big or small the property is. It's always a 200 amp service. Why? The labor to put in an electrical system, an electrical service at a property, is the same no matter what size system you're putting in. And the difference of the cost in the materials between a 100 amp and a 200 amp service are insignificant. I won't say there's not a difference. Go to Home Depot, go to Lowe's, price out a 200 amp panel versus a 100 amp panel. There's $20 worth of difference in the panel. Okay. The wiring, a little bit more difference. Okay. A 200 amp cable is going to be whatever, $3 a foot. And a 100 amp cable is going to be probably about $1.50. So it's going to be about twice the cost in materials to put in that system. But the total cost of materials, not including the wiring of the house, just the panel and the main cable, is maybe $600-700. It's not significant, as I said. So nowadays, nobody bothers with a 100 amp service in new construction. But maybe you're selling a house that's 40 years old, and at that time, that 100 amp service was an upgrade from maybe the 60 amp service that the house originally had. And truth be told, if you're not running everything all electric, like you've got oil heat or gas heat, maybe you have a gas hot water heater as well, or even a gas dryer or a gas stove, you really don't need a 200 amp service. But if everything is electric and you got a heat pump with central air and you got electric dryer and you got, electric, everything else, hot water heater and stove, then you really do need a 200 amp service to make sure everything is powered properly. So that's kind of an idea what you would expect to see. Okay. And I point that out all the time. If I'm showing a house, in fact, I just did this a couple of days ago. I showed a house, decent price point, and it had gas heat, gas stove, did not have central air. Okay. And gas hot water heater, had a 100 amp service. And I said to the buyer, well, 100 amp, that's plenty of power for this house since you're using natural gas for some of the big ticket items here, such as your hot water heater, your cooking, and even your dryer has a hookup to go either electric or gas. Okay. So I wouldn't worry too much about a 100 amp service in that point. In fact, if you have gas, everything else, and you even want to upgrade to a central air system, which you could also do with gas, but you could also do it with electric. It's another 20 amp breaker. AC units don't take that much power. Heating units do. If you're going to heat with electric heat, they take a lot of power, especially if it's got electric baseboard heat. Electric baseboard heat has its own thermostat typically in each room, and I like to call it a toaster in every bedroom, because that's really what it is. It's just a heating coil. It's the most inefficient heat you can have. It's also the cheapest heat to install, because a 4-foot piece of baseboard costs about $40. And the thermostat, believe it or not, costs $25. So it's the thermostat's almost as expensive as the unit. Then, of course, there's the wiring in between, but you have that anyway. So electric baseboard is something that is common in a house built 40-45 years ago, because, as I said, the builder could do the whole house for like $2,000 or less than that. And an oil burner would cost $10,000, and a heat pump would cost $10,000. So sometimes, once again, depending on the price range of the property, you'll see some of those things, and that's what happens there. All right, so showing the main living area first, going downstairs, showing the privacy area second, getting to the basement, going to the mechanical area, pointing out things to see down there would be obviously, if you see a water meter, then it's going to be public water. That'll also be listed on the sheet itself. You can't really tell if the property has a septic system from the basement. So you look at the system and see what is on the listing. As a septic, then you can point it out that, well, there's no sewer here. You have your own system. It means you have to have that pumped out typically every 3 years. Okay. So we'll point out those things in the basement area. If the basement is finished, obviously point out any highlights or appointments you see there. You might find a coal stove or a pellet stove, or there could even be just an electric fireplace down there for ambiance. There could be a bar. That's very, very popular. It's funny because not that many people use bars in their homes. However, for a time there, it was very popular to have a bar. And an upgrade, if there's a bar, would be if it's actually what we consider a wet bar. What's a wet bar? It means there's a sink there, and the sink has a drain on it, and you can wash glasses and all that right there at the bar. Might even be a built-in refrigerator. There could even be a tap system. Some of the older houses you'll see, somebody actually took the time to put in a beer meister. It's got a tap on it. Okay. Not that that's a big selling point. I'm saying if you see it, you can talk about it. Okay. But in that basic mechanical area, those are things to look for. Also, this will be a good idea on how to identify what kind of heat is there. So typically, if you've got gas heat, there's going to be either a hard galvanized pipe, or I'm sorry, black pipe that goes to it. If it's more modern, it'll actually be a yellow, I'm going to say a flexible pipe that goes to it. Okay, that's always designated by yellow for gas. Okay, so these are things just to get familiar with when you're looking at the heating systems down there. Okay, then we look at the exterior amenities. So now we're going to actually walk around the house. And by the way, I generally ask the people at this point in time if they're finished inside the house, or if there's anything else they want to see a second time. And I'll say the reason is once we go outside, I don't want to come in and possibly track any dirt in the house. Okay. That's just a courtesy thing. It shows them that you care about other people's property. They respect you for that type of thing. So do try to get to the point where they've seen everything in the house before they decide to walk around the outside of the house. Okay. So show exterior amenities. And I'll go through those in a minute. This is a good time to say, by the way, have you talked to a lender yet? And you might even ask this question earlier. If they start giving you signs of like, well, we really like this one. How do we go about getting it? Well, I'll kind of explain that. Well, the first thing you'll need to do is you'll need to talk to a lender to get pre-approved. Have you done that yet? If they say, yes, we have, great. I tell them, well, by the way, who'd you go with? And I'll eventually need a copy of your pre-approval letter. I'm sure your lender knows that you need one of those, because no seller will take their property off the market without a pre-approval letter. So that would be a way to lead into that conversation. If you're talking to someone where they have no clue, this is their first time doing this, and you ask them, well, have you talked to a mortgage company yet? No. Well, then I'll explain it to them. You're going to need to do that at some point before you'll be ready to write an offer. So if you said you were ready to write an offer on this property, see what I'm doing there? I weave in the question, kind of assuming the sale. I then ask them, hey, do you want to buy this one? No, but I'll go through that, and in a nonchalant way, I'll go back and I'll say, so should you want to put an offer on this property before a seller would consider your offer, especially if you're in competition with other potential offers, which nowadays is very common, you'll need to show your ability to purchase a property in this price range. So a lender will pre-qualify you. Doesn't cost you anything, by the way. And I can even refer some lenders to you that I've used in the past, unless you've got somebody that you use for this type of thing. If not, I'll kind of have one of my people give you a call, and they'll need 15, 20 minutes with you over the phone. They're going to ask you some questions, and they're going to ask you like how much you earn. The good news is they need to know that information. I don't. Okay. But you will have to disclose your financial information to a lender for them to give you a pre-qualification. So they'll do a couple of things. They'll ask you where you work, how long you've been there, and how much you make. They'll ask you the same question that you'll need to know if you were going to buy a car. Okay. So it's really a common sense type of thing, nothing that's really outside the ordinary. They'll also then ask permission to run your credit. They're going to establish what your credit score is. And based on your credit score and what your debt is, that's what's going to determine what you qualify for. And as long as you qualify for a house in this price range, or any house that you plan on purchasing, you'll get a pre-approval. Now, the pre-approval only comes after they do some verification. A pre-qualification is free and is done very quickly within a heartbeat. To get a full-blown pre-approval, you actually have to sign some documents so that they can go ahead and contact your employer to verify employment and things like that. Then you can get a pre-approval. If you've got time to shop, I always recommend you get a pre-approval before you put in an offer, because you'll look better than someone with just a pre-qual. But if you can get a pre-qual and you need to move quickly, that's still in most cases good enough to move forward. So I've explained that process to them. Now, exterior amenities is really fairly simple when I get to that point. Okay, what are some exterior amenities that we can look for? Well, obviously, if the house has a pool, that would be an exterior amenity. Other outbuildings, is there a shed? Okay. Have we gotten into the garage? Does the garage have garage door openers on it? Is there an extra door from the garage to get to the yard without having to go just through the garage doors? Okay. These are also things that you would look for in a garage. Is the garage got storage above, or is it a flat ceiling above because maybe there's a bedroom above it? Okay. If there's storage above, that would certainly be something to point out. Is the garage an oversized garage? Okay. Let's say an oversized garage could be in a 1-car garage or a 2-car garage. Well, obviously, a garage is determined by the number of doors for the most part. 3-car garages typically have 3 doors, but some have 2. They might have a big door and a small door. Okay. If there's 3 bays to park 3 cars, it's a 3-car garage. Now, could there be a bump out area on the side where there's room for a John Deere tractor or something like that? Yeah, then it's an oversized garage. Is it maybe longer in the back where you can pull your vehicle in there all the way, but you still have 4 feet in the back for like a shop or a workbench or something? If there is, that would be an oversized garage. Is there a garage where you pull the vehicles in and they're trunk and hood is right at the size of the garage, but there's extra space on either side of the doors for extra storage or shelving or things like that? It's still considered an oversized 2-car garage. Here's a note to jot down. Your standard 2-car garage is 21 by 20. It's not less than that. Okay. So I'm not saying you need to have your tape measure with you, but you'll get used to the fact that when you see one that basically just fits 2 cars in it, that's pretty much a standard garage, 21 by 20. And a typical 1-car garage is 21 by 12. Okay. So a little bit of extra distance on the side there for the 1-car garage, but you can fit 2 cars in a 21 by 20 space. So if I'm seeing this garage and I say, oh no, this is like 24, 27 feet, I've got a little bit of extra room. It might still be 21 on the sides. It could be wider on the sides. It could be 26 on the side by 21 length. Okay. Still considered an oversized garage. Over time, you'll get used to be able to picturing it, because after you show a few houses and you see, oh, there's room on either side of the door here for like at least a 12-inch shelf, it's slightly oversized, not by much, maybe only 2 feet, but it's still slightly oversized. Okay. If there's room where you can see where there's, room in the back, you come out the kitchen door, let's say, usually you'll step down in the garage 1 level, sometimes 2, and there'll be, 36 inches of space off the wall there. Maybe there's a hallway and there's another door that goes out to the yard. These are upgrades to look for in a garage. Also, another upgrade, if you see it, is some garages have an attic above them where the ceiling is finished, but there's a pull down attic staircase. If you see one of those, that would be considered an upgrade. Okay. And definitely if there's 2 doors and there's 2 garage door remotes, those are considered upgrades. Builders do not put those things in from new construction. Nowadays, builders do pre-wire homes for a garage door opener, but they don't install them. It's not part of the deal. You as the homeowner, when you buy the house, you do that. So when you're buying a house that's pre-existing home, probably the former owner at some point in time or someone has put in a garage door opener for their convenience. Well, of course, they go along with the house. But the important thing is that would be considered an upgrade to point out if you're showing a pre-existing home. If you're showing new construction, you can tell them, well, that doesn't come with any of that stuff. Typically doesn't come with a deck either. You got to build that or pay extra for it. Okay. So those are just some things to look for on the outside. Other things to point out would be if you see something that's beautifully landscaped, yeah, that's a big thing to talk about. You see something that's got a freshly paved or sealed driveway, yeah, that's certainly something to talk about. Driveway seems to be in nice shape. This is also a good time to take a look at the roof. Now, don't get into the trap of thinking you're a roofer or that you need to be one. Okay. It's okay to point out something that says roof looks good, be something that maybe you'd want an expert to look at, but I don't see any obvious problems, because if I see obvious problems, I'm going to point that out. I'm going to say, well, roof looks a little bit questionable. See, I see a little bit of waviness over there. Okay. It might be something that if you decide to do something on this one, you may want to have that inspected. So people appreciate your knowledge of pointing out things like that, even when you're pointing out a negative. I know we're always taught in sales classes, don't highlight any negatives. No. I don't necessarily subscribe to that mentality when it comes to showing houses. People are looking for you to be the expert. So you not pointing out something that's downright obvious is a problem. Okay. Because, people are going to trust your ability to look for some of the things that they're not going to see. You're the trained eye. You're the expert. You're the one that does, you show 40 properties in a month. These people are going to see 3 to 12 properties before they make a buying decision. And let's look at it this way. Even after you're in this business in as little as 3 months or in as little as 6 months, even if you've only sold 2 houses, you've still probably beat the expertise level of most of the buyers, because most people buy 3 houses in their lifetime. Okay. And you're going to sell 3 houses a month. Maybe not when you start out, but you're going to sell 3 houses a month going forward. It might take you a couple of months before you get to that level, but at some point in time, you're going to be the one that sells 12 houses a year, 20 houses a year, 40 houses a year. So who's the expert? You're going to be 10 times better than your most savvy buyer out there, unless they've actually bought 40 houses. Okay. And by the way, you will find some here and there that have. I've owned 33 properties, just to give you a clue. I like to move a lot. Not lately, but I did used to do that when I was younger, because I flipped a lot of them. Remember, I was in construction. That's how I got into real estate, by the way. I flipped houses. And then I found that the realtors were real lazy because they wouldn't take me out because I wasn't buying expensive properties. And I lived in all these properties. I was single and I lived in these houses. I rehabbed them. I flipped them. Not immediately, usually after a year. And I did that for quite a while. So needless to say, you will be the expert long before they will be able to say they are the expert. They're going to look for you to be the one that gives them guidance and points out things like that. So don't be afraid to point out anything that's considered a negative. They appreciate your honesty when it comes to that. And let's face it, you didn't make the house. It's not like you've got to say, oh, I'm proud of my product. You know, you simply represent a transaction. You're the guy in the middle. Okay. The seller's the seller, the buyer's the buyer. That's what I love about real estate sales. You buy a Chevy, you're representing a Chevy dealer. Okay. So needless to say, your Chevy's the best Chevy of any Chevy because you're selling it, right? Well, that's being a salesman. Well, that you don't have to do that when you're selling real estate. But you do have to do this. You do have to point out the important things to see, and also try to point out the important things that can't be seen or that are not obvious, because you're the expert. That's why gaining that knowledge of electrical systems and what fancy kitchens look like and the difference between crappy floors and decent flooring, these are all things that are going to help you in the long run. After we asked that question about, have you talked to a mortgage company, you may lead into the last question. This one sometimes gives you pushback, as I mentioned. But by this time, as you can see, you should have established a decent amount of rapport with this potential buyer. And when we ask them, well, how much cash you have available for your purchase, including your down payment and closing costs, it sometimes steps them back, especially if they're brand new buyers. This is their first time going through this experience. You get a deer in the headlight look. Okay, well, what does that mean? Okay, well, the reason I asked the question, because they won't necessarily answer it right away. Some do, by the way. Some will say, well, we got about 30,000 to work with. That's great. Okay, it gives me an idea of what you're working with here. So if I'm showing them let's say a $300,000 house, which is very close to the average price range of a house in the Lehigh Valley right now, it's actually like 275, but let's round the number to 300 because I can do the math in my head a little bit easier. I know that with $30,000 down, they could put 10% down, but they'd have no money for closing costs on a $300,000 property. Doesn't mean they have to put 10% down. They can probably get away with 5% down conventional. That's going to cost them $15,000. They'll have about $15,000 left to pay their closing costs. That's where getting a closing cost estimate from a lender is going to be close. They could be $1,000 or $2,000 short, but keep in mind, they don't have to have all that money right now. They need it within 60 days when they go to settlement. They could potentially earn that much of a difference in that amount of time. So when I asked the question and they give me the pushback, I explained to them, well, the reason I asked that question, Joe and Mary, is because knowing how much cash you have available is going to determine what type of financing you're going to need. For example, and I'll go right into this. I'll ask you right away, Joe, Mary, are either one of you veterans by any chance? And if they say, yes, we have, I always say, well, thank you for your service. And let me explain something to you that's really going to help you. You qualify for a VA benefit, which means you can actually buy a property with zero money down. So you could use your cash that you have available for just your closing costs. Because right now, asking for a seller assist, which is available, is difficult to get in a competitive marketplace. But if they say they're a VA, I'm having that conversation with them. Most of the time they don't. Most of the time they can say, well, no, but well, then probably the next best program for you other than conventional is anybody can go FHA. FHA requires 3.5% down. That means that typically on a $300,000 price range house, you're going to need, let's see, do the math, $3,500 for 100,000, $7,000 for 200,000. That's going to be 10,500 for a $300,000 home. So needless to say, if they're buying a home in that price range, well, the good news is you got about 20,000 to work with. They said 30,000 to work with. Well, you're in good shape. You can go FHA. You possibly can go conventional, but that's why I asked that question, so I can kind of point you in the right direction. The one that really needs to know the answer to that question is going to be your lender. But at some point in time, once we get past the part of you selecting a property, we're going to write an offer on a property. We're going to submit that offer, and we're going to have to show proof of how you plan on funding that housing purchase. And the stronger you look on paper, the better your chances are of succeeding in getting that offer accepted. So now I've justified my reason for asking that question. I generally don't have any pushback. They'll usually tell me exactly what I need to know at this point in time. Now, when I've finished with this appointment, and let's say they say they're ready to go, and I point them out to one of my lenders, I can give my lender a heads up. Now, I don't know how much they make because I never asked that question. I don't need to know that. Okay. And I didn't ask them how much debt they have. I don't need to know what their balances are on their credit cards, or if they have student loans or car loans or anything like that. That's what the lender's going to do. All I've done at this point in time is I've shown a whole lot of knowledge and an ability to help them accomplish their goal. Do you think with this presentation, you can win over the average agent just getting a real estate license that comes out with and gets no training? I can tell you right now, you will win. And they'll never even ask you, are you a brand new licensee? One of the tough things about starting a career in real estate is the courses are great. The test is interesting. Okay. Doesn't teach you how to be successful in real estate. It teaches you how to pass a test. It teaches you how to not get sued. And don't get me wrong, those are all important. It does not teach you how to sell a house. It does not teach you how to win with a buyer. And how you win with the buyer is going to be in your presentation. This is going to be true when you're working with a seller. How do you win with a seller? Next week, we'll talk about sellers. You win with the seller by being able to be the person that comes off with the most knowledge and ability on how to structurally sell their house. That's how you win with the seller. With the buyer, it's how do you help me accomplish my goal? And you'll have less to do on a more savvy buyer. So you're selling someone a house and let's say they're downsizing from their big house. Maybe they came from another state and they're renting temporarily till they find a house here because they just relocated. Okay. They may have a lot of knowledge and background in the back from the standpoint of having purchased properties. But even so, ask them, when was the last time you did it? Oh, I was in that last house 12 years. Okay, well, it's 12 years since you've bought a property. Some things have changed in the industry, and they have. Okay. So even if they are a savvy, knowledgeable buyer, even if they have some past experience, doesn't mean they have your experience, because you deal with this every day. They deal with it in 12 years. Maybe they haven't done it in 25 years. Whole different. Hey, go back 40 years. A seller's disclosure statement didn't exist. Okay. Buyer agency didn't exist. Okay. So these are things that obviously are different today, that somebody who said, oh yeah, I bought my house in 1985. Well, guess what? It's not 1985 anymore. And things have changed. Even construction has changed to some degree. And so pointing out all those differences are things that make you the expert. When you are the expert and when you believe yourself to be the expert, your confidence level goes from here to way up here. The key to the successful part of doing this business is your confidence level. As you can see, I have no lack of confidence in my ability to sell properties. Doing this 35 years. If I did, thered be something wrong with me at this point in time. You don't have to, it doesn't take 35 years to do that. But I can remember starting out in the business with no training in 1987 when I got licensed. And it was like, well, here you go, knock on doors and see who wants to sell something. Oh, really? That was it? You know, ask your friends and relatives if anybody's interested in moving soon, or if they have something they want to sell. That was kind of how I started in the industry. Okay. Truth to tell, I really wasn't interested in selling houses that much. I was interested in buying them. I had a successful business and contracting career. Did some, I never got to the full scale building brand new construction. I didn't want to, too many things to work with on there, but I did a whole lot of additions. And of course, I started out in the 70s as an electrician. So that's what I primarily focused on. But along the way, I learned about plumbing, and I learned about framing, and I learned about roofing, and I learned about a bunch of other things, because when you're doing that stuff every day, you just get exposed to it. The more you get exposed to it, the more you learn. And then you actually go for and get what's called a general contractor's license. So licensed in all these things, and then you learn how to build just about anything. Okay. Don't feel like doing that anymore. However, the knowledge from doing it is invaluable, and you don't even have to be a contractor to know the basics that you need to be successful. So that actually wraps this class up. But if anybody has any questions, I'm here to take any questions you have.
Hey, Tim, Bill
Yeah.
Lake, quick question for you. So, and this might be pretty obvious. I assume that when you do showings, interact with clients, that you're going to be dressed pretty nicely. I mean, I only ask that because I've seen some people involved in this business that weren't, but I would assume a suit and tie is what you recommend, or not. I mean,
you got a good one there. So, all right, I'm probably not the best person to ask this question. So you might notice that I'm wearing a golf shirt.
Well, I am too for class. Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
well, I wear them every day. Okay. Now I will tell you that the industry has changed a bit. When I started out, yes, I wore a suit and tie every day. I was also told by my original broker, not Lauren, by the way, because I didn't start with him. I started with someone else because, like I said, I really didn't care who I worked for because I was really working for me. So when I started in 1987, I really wasn't selling houses to anyone. I was pretty much trying to use my real estate license to buy them. And I was buying flip properties. Okay. But I had 7 brothers, by the way. My wife has 6. And around that time, it was like, hey, I saw, could you show me? Well, I guess I can. I got a license that says I can. And so I went full time in real estate in 1991. So for 4 years, I pretty much did other stuff. I even owned a bar. I'm not going into the detail of that, but my primary focus wasn't real estate. I had a real estate license. So when I say, I've done real estate for 35 years, that's true. I've been licensed that long, but I didn't focus on working with buyers other than people that I already knew until 1991. And that's when I realized it. So I kind of came in from a little bit of a side background before I really started to take the career seriously. And as I got older, I said, yeah, you know what? Maybe I don't want to climb the ladders anymore. So maybe this is a good way to go. And that's kind of what I did. Now, I was told by my broker, sell your truck and get a nice car. You're going to take people around. You don't want them to go around in your truck, which is true in 1991. Okay. And I was told, wear a suit and a tie every day, which I did. Okay. And then I went to work for Lauren, and I still did that. But it cut more and more casual as time went. Well, then in 1999, I moved to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, where I lived for 5 years until 2004. And I learned in South Carolina, no one wears suits and ties down there. They all wear golf shirts. Now, all the golf shirts have your company name on them, like mine does. Okay. So needless to say, there's a bit of branding that takes place. Yeah, nice slacks and so forth and so on. I mean, don't look like a slob, but you do not have to dress formally. Now, as time has moved on, a lot of professions, ours included, especially being in and out all the time, has gone less the way of the suit and tie type of thing. We no longer have to look like bankers to do the business. Now, there's settings when you do. Okay. Depending on the type of property that you're showing, you will do that. If you're showing a lot of commercial properties, commercial agents never put a suit and tie on. Okay. They're generally not doing that. Do you maybe put a suit and tie on when you go to settlement? Sure. Okay. But it really is one of those things that's an individual thing. If you're most comfortable wearing a suit and tie, absolutely wear it. Some people still do. You'll see as time goes on, very few do anymore. Most of them wear golf shirts, but they have their company name on them. And they don't come out in shorts and sneakers either, where, a decent, a casual approach is fine in real estate. And it seems to be the adopted method at this point in time. I still wear a golf shirt, but this time of the year, I have a suit jacket too. Okay. That does come off once we get past this 28-degree weather we're having right here. Okay. But it's always in the car. I can throw that suit jacket on when I go into a settlement and it looks just fine. That's me. And we're not going to tell you how to dress. But if you're asking me from a general observational point of view, I would say you don't really need the suit and tie anymore. But far be it from me to make you come out of your comfort zone if that's what you're used to wearing.
Are there, I wore a suit and tie for quite a long time.
I did too. I went to Catholic school for 12 years, So got it.
Can we purchase the Century 21
yes
polo shirts?
Yes.
Through,
yeah.
Okay.
We have all that. So once you get into the system, you'll be able to go on 121 and be able to look at the vendors and sell all that stuff. I just got back from Vegas last week, as I said, and when we ever go out to, if you ever go on a convention, I highly recommend it, by the way. Next year it's in Florida, but if you go on to a convention, you'll see the vendors are all there. The people we buy signs from are there, shirts, any type of dress you want. You get our business cards there. I mean, all kinds of stuff is available to the vendors. You can even get license plates for the front of your vehicle that say Century 21 on them, and even customize one, say Century 21 Kime on them if you want to. But yeah, you can also, and you don't have to buy from them. You know, you could have your shirt done somewhere else and have someone embroider the nameplate on there. Okay, that's what I do. So,
Okay, thank you.
any other questions? Not necessarily on how to dress, but on anything we covered here today.
Hi, Tim. I got a quick question
Go
about
ahead.
objections. So I know that you said that if you show like that you're knowledgeable and that you have the ability to, you know, meet the client's needs, they probably won't ask you, like how new are you? But
Right.
if they did ask you, how would you,
I'd
handle
answer
that?
honestly. Yeah, never tell them anything that's a lie. You want to, don't get in the habit of lying in real estate. You don't have to. Number one, you just don't have to. If you tell them that, you just say, you do, and I'm still learning, but I've learned a lot, and I've got the support of a broker with 40 plus years in business, which you do. Actually, combined, there's about 7 brokers in our company. Lauren and I are 2 of them. I'm 35 years, he's 37 years, but we have hundreds of years of brokers' knowledge behind us to back us up, and from different walks of life. I mean, you probably know Lauren teaches real estate, commercial real estate at Lehigh University. I myself sat on pro standards for 5 years, the board of directors at the local level for 6 years, and I'm on my 4th year at the state board of directors. So we've come from a large background of knowledge, and you can tell. Well, and it's funny because people say, wow, you seem to really know a lot of business. How long are you doing this? Oh, believe it or not, I'm actually pretty new, but I've got some really good trainers in the company with years of experience. And if I don't know the answer to something, they do. And I have them pretty much on my speed dial. So anytime I run into something I can't answer, which is rare, I'll throw something like that in there. I absolutely can get you the answer in a fairly short period of time. So you don't need to lie. Okay. I'm telling you that if you come off professional, so professional looking, people won't tend to ask you that question because you just seem like you know the business so well. But if they absolutely outright ask you the question, don't be afraid to tell them. Let's look at that another way. Let's say you're working with somebody, your brother, your sister. I don't know if you have any siblings, but let's say you got a brother or sister, or your mom or dad want to buy a property. They know how long you've been in the business. There's no secret there. Okay. And they might be even a little bit reluctant to use you because they might say, I'm a little not sure about using you. I'm nothing against you, but I know that you're brand new. And I'd answer them the same way. You know what? I know a lot in the short amount of time I've been in the business because I've got the backing of a great bunch of people that know more than I do and will help me if I run into something I don't know. So you don't have to worry about that. Part of the reason that I mentioned yesterday that when I do go on a listing, because buyers are actually pretty easy. Okay. Buyers don't really care as much as you think they care about how long you've been into business. They're willing, and they can work with any buyer. They know that. You haven't asked them to sign anything yet. We're going to get into that part tomorrow. Okay. But, and they generally, by the way, don't sign after one presentation anyway. Okay. But I certainly wouldn't want you to take someone out and show them 40 properties and have them end up buying it from someone else. So the whole idea of my start tonight saying that I will show one buyer, one property, anytime, the first time, all the time, is because I'm not afraid to get my hands dirty that first time. I might be wasting my time. Maybe this person is dead broke with a 420 credit score. I don't need to know that right now. I do need to know that before I show them 40 houses, however. That's why meeting them in person, getting them a chance to evaluate me and me to evaluate them evaluating me based on my knowledge and experience and how well I show the property, me evaluating them by basically getting the answers to these questions, we determine whether we're a good match, whether we're a fit, whether we think we can make something happen together. And 9 times out of 10, or maybe actually 99 times out of 100, we can. That one time when you can't, okay, que sera, sera. I didn't really lose much as an hour of my time, a thimbleful of gas, maybe not quite that. But anyway, the point is not that big of a deal. But you're showing your parents a house. It's like, well, I don't know. Sometimes it's actually harder to work with family. Believe me, because when I started in real estate, that's all I worked with was family. And they tried to tell me, oh, no, this is the way you got to do it. Okay. So, so look, let's go have a beer and I'll tell you how we get this done. So that's a little bit different with somebody in your warm market. You can do that. But yeah, in your presentation to the general public where they don't know, like, and trust you yet, you have to win with them. Okay. So, yeah, absolutely tell them the honest truth, but you can tell them the honest truth with what I just told you, with the backing of what you have behind you here. Hope
Gotcha.
that answers that question.
Yep. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, then we'll wrap this up for today. Tomorrow, just to kind of give you a preview. Oh, and by the way, these handouts here, when I do these classes live, I print these out and give them to you. I do like the idea of the recorded classes because you can kind of come back to them at any time. And I change it up every time a little bit anyway. There's not always the same recording. And sometimes people ask questions like you guys did that aren't asked in other classes. So I like the idea of being able to do these live, even if not in person. But I will email you guys the handouts from today. Now, yesterday there was no handout. It was just the agreement of sale. And you can access that anytime you want. We have printed copies in the office. And of course, you will, if not already, you will have access to the Zip Forms program to get into all the rest of the forms. These handouts I'll give you. I recommend you kind of keep them with you, punch 3 holes in them and put them in a binder if you like. Keep them until you internalize them. Once you internalize them, it's not that difficult. You'll just do it naturally off the top of your head at some point in time. Then you'll be really in good shape. Next week, when we do the selling side, the whole track system I cover is a little bit more detailed than just these questions here. Tomorrow, when I start going through how to do a CMA for the buyer and how to do searches on the MLS, because we'll be pulling that up on the screen. Some of you may be seeing that for the first time. You'll get to see a lot more of it later. But I do have certain procedures on how to set up searches on another handout, which I'll be doing tomorrow. But I'll send these out to you. Let's see, I probably have all your email addresses already. I'll send these out to you guys today so that you get them in your email right away. And that way you can print them. And you can even just come to the office and print them. You don't have to print them on your own printer if you don't want to. We'll pay for the printing, but you can print them out and have them set and ready to go so that you can get familiar with how to use these things as you go forward. All right. One last time, I'll ask if there are any other questions. If not, we'll adjourn.